Welcome, everybody, and welcome to Building the Black Educator Pipeline podcast. I am your host, Shayna Terrell, educator activist dedicated to the lifelong struggle for the freedom and liberation for my people. What's up to all my co-conspirators out there and all my new supporters joining us for yet another episode? Our new supporters, thank you so much for downloading and listening. Listen, we are on all major platforms, Apple, Spotify, Amazon. So please make sure that you rate us and you leave a review. And make sure you tell a friend to tell a friend, but then tell them again to download this podcast. And shout out to Bright Bream and the Center for Black Educator Development for providing us with this platform to talk to real people in the real struggle, doing the real work. With that said, today's theme is building a Black Educator Pipeline podcast with Black leadership. With so many things happening in education right now more than ever, having a Black leader in education who is a change agent and who is competent is so important for our communities. Joining us today, we'll have Dr. William Hayes, CEO of Boys Latin Charter Schools, joining us to discuss the current state of education and the importance of Black leadership. So please welcome Dr. Hayes. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yes, we hyped to have you, brother. Listen, you are the now in education, and I think it's important at this time of what's going on to hear someone's voice who is actually in the grind doing the work. So we appreciate you coming through.
Absolutely. Thank you. Glad to be here.
So please, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Share with us who you are. Tell the folks your work, past and present. Who is Dr. Hayes?
Well, I am currently in the now the Chief Executive Officer of Boys Latin of Philadelphia, an all-male charter school in West Philadelphia. I'm not from Philadelphia, though I call Philadelphia home and absolutely love the city. I'm from Hartsville, South Carolina. I always take every chance to shout out my hometown. Population 7,000, and so I am from a very tight-knit community.
Yes.
I started my career teaching in Boston public schools, Boston, Massachusetts, worked my way up there to an assistant principal. Then I moved to Cleveland, Ohio as a school turnaround principal, pre-K to 8th grade. From there, came out to the East Coast again as a founding principal of a middle school and a high school. And so my career trajectory has spanned public, charter, pre-K to 12th grade, all over the place.
That's dope. Like a long span, starting schools, being in schools, and public charter, like really doing your thing. From the babies to the grownies, you was out here.
Oh yeah. And there's a big difference between pre-K and 12th grade.
It's 12th grade.
I have learned a great deal in all of those experiences.
I think that's dope to be able to have that myriad of experiences as well. Some people live their kind of education span in like one life, like mine was only in secondary. So be able to experience the babies all the way through, that definitely speaks to your experience and what you know about needs for children and for the educators you serve. So that's pretty dope.
Absolutely.
But speaking of that, please share with us your journey to education. Like what inspired you to be an educator?
Oh man, the answer should be that I was inspired by my aunt, who was a 4th grade teacher, my mother, who was a Head Start director, my grandmother, who was a math teacher.
Wow.
My grandmother's sister, who was a biology teacher. I should have been inspired by those folks, but I wasn't. I did not intend to go into teaching or the K-12 sector as a teacher. I actually left off to college with the intent of being a medical doctor, then realized I don't really like science that much. Decided I would go into child psychology, so I enrolled in a master's in counseling program and did an internship at a high school in Boston, Massachusetts. And part of my work was to develop programming and prevention strategies for at-risk students, but also develop programming that would increase the number of students that got into college. And so in that coursework, the principal read my program design and said, I want you to bring that program and teach here. And so my inspiration was actually being told, I want you to do this. And so I think there is some value in being inspired by being wanted.
Definitely by being wanted. I think that's amazing to have all those teachers in your, like, well, in your entire family, like, oh yeah, y'all good, go and do that?
Yes, I was working during the summer setting up classrooms. I know what it is to grade papers. And so that in and of itself, just being the proximity wasn't enough for me to necessarily see myself in the position, nor was I necessarily told as a top high performing Black male to go off to school and to become an educator. And so I think there was an understanding that you're better than this. You should go do something else. Right. And so I think we give that narrative to Black students who go off to college pretty clearly. Go be a doctor, lawyer, engineer, and we might give you IT at this point in time.
That like pierced my heart to hear you say that. Like a high achieving Black male and somebody's telling you you're better than this. Like you're better than being a teacher. As if that's like a low, raggedy profession.
Right. Imagine me having to correct that message now. So I have to speak to I have to speak to myself, right? And just really change the narrative around the potential and the opportunity. And honestly, how much better teaching and learning and education is than other careers.
It really is, because of the impact that you have and that you can make. One of the things I always say about education and teaching is like the impact that you literally hold the impact of what the next generation is going to be, because you hold the minds of the next. You're literally shaping and molding their perceptions of the world, what they learn about the world, what they learn about each other, what they learn about themselves, all of that. Like you hold the key to every piece of that. Absolutely. Of our next generation. Our teachers, especially when you're seeing what's happening now in terms of education, politics, all of that, capitalism, like our teachers are literally the key to salvation. Because what are we teaching these children? So yeah, it's definitely not a petty profession.
And I actually believe the job itself, impact aside, right? So the impact is the thing we always tell folks. It's an honorable profession, and it's revolutionary and things we should commit to. But the actual function of the job is also better than some other jobs, right? And so where can you leverage your creativity towards an outcome and a goal that you can see immediately? Where do you get to connect to individuals and build a network that sustains itself over time? I mean, even just thinking about working hours, thinking about the upward trajectory in terms of finances and pay, all of these things are things we don't necessarily sell that make this profession great, right? So even in entering into teaching, I can see a clear path forward around what leadership development and advancement can look like in this position, right? When I think about pathways that I can take that mirror my own interests, right? There are multiple subjects I can teach, ways that I can teach it. There are short-term wins that you can celebrate immediately in the outcomes of your students and in the growth of a school. And then there's a long-term connection to a community of people that you can leverage just because you share the common position that doesn't often exist in other careers. So I like to sell the opportunity to impact the world, and I like to sell the fact that the career is actually pretty dope.
And I've never heard it talked about it. I heard people talk about it in the way that you just described, right? And I think we go to impact because with all these jobs that we're competing for children not to go into, like we talk about impact like, oh, if you're going to be a doctor, but I want to save lives. And you're like, but you can save lives by being a teacher. I want to be a lawyer because I want to like keep people out of jail and defend the innocent. But you can do that if you just keep the children out of jail by being a teacher. Yep. So you're like putting all these counter narratives out about why teaching is important. But the self-fulfillment that you just described, how people can find many different reasons of satisfaction for teaching is super interesting. One thing you hit on too that people don't talk about enough is this idea that like teaching is a poor man's job. Which for me is like, but it's not. It's really not. And who put that out there? And so you know the numbers, like.
Oh, I know the numbers because I check that budget regularly. and so I think, and that is, I think there's a necessary merger of the old guard in the way that we saw and valued teaching and how we sold it versus the new guard, right? So there is a new generation out there that they are equally committed to impact and they will figure out how to make an impact. And so they don't necessarily have to choose teaching as the path to make an impact. And so impact alone won't be the selling point, right? There has to be a conversation around like why this particular pathway of impact, right? So when I think about my role as a teacher and a leader, I think about where else in the world can I have access to this many kids who can carry the same message I believe, right? And so if my true goal is impact, then I go to the place where the most kids are, right? Where else can I get a solid 2 months off to think and process and figure out my own creative, how to get those flowing, right? Where can I figure out if I want to earn an extra stipend within the school day? How can I flex that, hustle that, right? Get an additional certificate. And so I think about how can we make this profession clearly marketable to a generation that is certainly going to figure out how to make their voices heard. I just want you to do it here. And I'm going to try to show you why it's better over here than other places.
Listen, you are now the education salesman, okay? Because that pitch that I just heard, again, and very innovative. I don't think that people are thinking about creating a pitch that appeals to young people in that way. And we have a lot of conversations on this podcast specifically about how to recruit young people into the profession. And for folks out there listening, you have just given us some very innovative ways, very innovative ideas to capture young people's interest into this profession.
Yep.
But this is why, right, that someone like you in your position is so critical right now to education. Number one, Black unicorn, right? That's what they will say. Like, you are a Black male in education and a CEO, nonetheless, of a charter organization. Like, bro, how you get here, right? Like, that's
right.
What people will probably be thinking and asking and wondering. But I would love to hear from you. Why is Black leadership, especially right now, why is it so crucial? Especially in Black-led districts, like where kids are predominantly Black.
So I think we first have to recognize, again, there's a shifting of the narrative, right? And so we typically see the burden of leadership and the ability to have a supreme breadth and depth of impact on students' lives. And that is important. And it is equally important to see the role as a position of power and influence to make ways for other people to join you in this fight and to also clear some of the barriers that prevent people from getting into the profession and prevent kids from accessing opportunities. And so when I think about where I am now, in every instance in my educational pathway, somebody said to me, you should do this thing. When I became a teacher, the principal said, you should be a teacher. And she said, this is how I'm going to get you to be a teacher, right? And so I actually never really had to figure out the pathway. And so I think both the opportunities and the acceleration of my career are directly attributed to the mentors and people who were already in the positions of power that I aspired to, that made ways for me. And that was in a way that was very strategic and also humble in their approach, right? And so they were not trying to push me down or push me back, but they created opportunities. They put me in spaces where I met people. They gave me challenges, allowed me to take risks, to learn my own leadership style and my voice. And so when I think about when I became an assistant principal, I had never done the job before, but somebody was willing to take a risk on me to do the job and to develop a pathway for me to be able to do it. They didn't say, well, when you figure out how to get the cert or when you figure out, and demonstrate all these competencies, then I'll hire you for the job. And so I think people just gave me space to actually become kind of where I am right now.
I love that. And it sounds like you do what we tell people all the time. Tell these young people that you can see them in leadership. Tell these young people, like, hey, you would make a fantastic teacher. Take them under your wing, mentor them. And it sounded like that's what people have done for you every step of the way.
And the truth of the matter is, like, half of them at this point, and they shouldn't, don't know what they want to do. So I just tell them to go do it. I'm just like, listen, you're going to school, you're majoring in education, we'll figure it out. Or actually, don't major in education, major in math, because we need more math teachers. We'll figure out the back end of what you really think you want to do when you finish. And sometimes, like, young people really just want to be given direction. There's a lot of options out here. And sometimes it's not enough to say, I see you being able to do this thing. It's enough to say, go do this. You should do it. Even when I became the CEO, I have multiple degrees, a lot of experience. And my first response was, I've never done this. You don't see examples of people who make this transition from principal to CEO. Why would I be the person to do it? And literally the text thread, the friends, the people like, shut up, apply.
And do it. And do it. Listen, the level of confidence in you and your abilities too is important.
Right.
I mean, you're extremely competent, right?
Absolutely.
Anybody who has worked with you knows that. Like that's
Yes.
another part of
I think I'm
of
competent and I think I'm equally self-aware of my own shortcomings and how
hmm
to leverage my strengths and find support where there are gaps.
That's the competence though, right? Like I am not strong here, so here's who I'm gonna hire, here's who I'm gonna work with to leverage what I don't know. Right? Some people aren't good at that. Some people will be just in the pool drowning.
Absolutely.
Just drowning.
And I think we feel like we have to demonstrate a certain level of competence, which you should. You should have a baseline of competence, but we have like the supreme expectation of ourselves that we need to check off all these boxes before we're ever worthy enough to sit in the seat and hold the position. And there are
Yeah.
counterparts who just simply don't share that expectation of themselves. They feel entitled to the position just because.
Well, don't glaze it, honey, because you're
Yes,
glazing over to say counterparts. Let's name
white
it.
mediocrity is a thing, right? And I think that privilege
Yes.
holds up this idea that I am simply deserving because I exist. And black folk never have that privilege to just say, I deserve it because I exist. Right? I deserve it because my resume says I've done this, I've seen it. My degrees say I can accomplish it. And if for no other reason, I deserve it because you had a chance to fail at it.
Yes. It's a phenomenal point. I deserve it because you couldn't do it. Give it to me.
Right.
Facts. White mediocrity. I'm glad you named that because as you're saying that, yes, white counterparts, specifically in a lot of these educational spaces, white men, right, find themselves in leaderships because somebody said go do it, or maybe somebody didn't tell them go. Like, I want to be in charge, so I'm just gonna apply.
Yeah, and there's
And I'm gonna make it happen.
it's also held up. And in many cases, they don't even know it, right? You're not even aware of the systems that hold you up in these positions, right? And so there is a privilege in an assumed competence, right? So that people don't, when you walk in the room, people assume you know this thing. They don't assume that they need to question and interrogate that. You have the privilege to take a risk that if this does not work out, someone will find something else for you to do. You have the privilege of grace, right? So
Yep.
we can say to a first year white leader, they should get coaching. They need developing. It didn't work out the first year. But black folks are on the chopping block immediately. You better turn it around, get
Immediately.
results ASAP. And if you didn't do it, it's not because you didn't get coached. It's not because you didn't get support. It's because you weren't competent. But we can find all these other reasons why success has not happened in spaces that are typically led by white leaders and make all of these excuses in full
Yes.
transparency.
I love it. I love it. Speak that truth. So right now, right, as just a black leader in these times, you are a post-pandemic leader. You are also a leader who's leading in the crisis of a teacher shortage. You're also a leader who is leading right now where our children are in severe crisis right now. How should administrators in schools be showing up for teachers right now?
Oh man, that is so heavy, right? And I struggle with that. I do struggle with that. I think I struggle with it particularly because just in leadership, you have to consider the humanity of all stakeholders and where are all of those people. And we can't get caught up in the humanity of the actual business that we are in of educating students, right? So there's a line in which I need to respect your humanity and we need to respect that we are both employed by nature of our commitment to the business of educating students. And so I think it's a very nuanced approach to figuring out how can I get the best out of teachers and leaders through support, but how can I also ensure that we have some things in place in terms of accountability to ensure that we're actually handling our business. And I'm thinking we have enough of that conversation around the business of education. We love to talk about like the let's professionalize the field, but we don't often talk about like there are some things that we need to hold ourselves accountable for kids because the only people in here that are forced to be here are those kids,
For the
right?
kids.
That's the business. They in many cases, yes, they choose boys Latin, but if they could just go home and chill, they probably would. If I could go home and chill, I probably would.
Yeah, I would.
Right. And so because I'm committed to them, I do have to prioritize what they need in this moment, but also realize that the only way they're truly going to get that is if I have teachers who are capable and able and well enough to give them what they need. And so you have to really think in a way that you can't make a false binary choice. It changes. On a Monday, I'm going to make the choice for the teachers. On a Tuesday, I'm going to have to make it for the kids. And I'm going to have to do this in service to our overall outcomes for students. And so you ask questions, you figure out, you see the landscape, you see what's ahead, you see where we are, and really make conscious choices that really go towards those stakeholder groups that are within your building, teachers, leaders, and students.
But the reason why the answer you gave was the right answer, because there is no right answer.
Right.
And I think that a lot of times people are looking for, well, what's the silver bullet? What's the magic potion? Like, what can I do as an administrator to show up right now for teachers in my building? Ask them. Ask them and assess the landscape. And I agree with you. It is like really tricky. Because I agree with you. Like, we are in the business of service. Like, you're at work, and I should be supporting you and loving you, but at the same time, I'm in service to kids.
Yep.
And I always have to keep that at the forefront of my mind. I remember one of my great leaders gave me a book to read. If you don't feed the teachers, they will eat the children. So
and they will. Like, that is a true thing. Like, I don't think we pay enough attention to the well-being of teachers and the impact that it does have on students.
On kids.
Because when that door closes and it's just them in the 25, you can't observe all of the classes at the same time. And so you want a good faith understanding that we gonna all operate with a level of excellence, and we are all capable and well enough to do that. And I keep pushing this like wellness piece because
yes,
our work is emotionally taxing in ways that other careers are not, right? And so
yes,
we do need to
true.
guard our hearts and guard our minds and ensure that we are well enough to provide our students a high quality education. And so how we do that, both systemically and individually and collectively within a building, we have to pay attention to that for the long-term sustainability of the career.
Yep. I think mental wellness and education is something that's not talked about enough. And with all of the trauma and things that are happening in the world, to not focus on teachers' mental health or not pay enough attention to what wellness has to happen with them, to me, it becomes quite concerning. And when people are wondering why teachers are leaving the profession in large droves, some of it has to do with, I don't think anybody, if they have other options, are going to stay in a place that's that emotionally taxing and not get support. Like, the level of anxiety that you may feel coming into work or dealing with certain situations, like, your mind is telling you, I can't be here. I mean, some people will quit teaching and not have another job because I just can't do this.
And have,
like, I can't.
And have. Like, I'm not telling you what I heard. I'm telling you what I know.
What
they
you
have.
know. Yeah, I can't do this. And I think more times than not, it is attached to more of the mental wellness than what we think it is, because of all that is going on and all the trauma that they've had to experience. And I know we do a deep dive into how the pandemic has affected children and how it has affected student learning and learning gaps. But I don't know if we've done enough deep diving in terms of research and what has been the impact on the people who are in the front lines. And what's crazy about this, right? If we were at war, right? People would be talking about the casualties or the frontline people who have to go in to fight first, or like that's what we'd be talking about. Though it's not a physical war as someone would see it, like teachers are at war with violence, teachers are at war with the pandemic, people are at war with teachers are at war with a forever changing world. And we don't stop to think enough about how they're impacted or affected, or the expectation that you only hear from 8 to 3, then you should be able to turn it off. It's like an insane expectation of people who are human. Yep. Like, we're real. These problems come home. These problems linger. They do stay. But finding a way to support mental wellness with teachers and still respect the business, right, and the profession, I think is an interesting contrast, right? Because you expect it to work and show up. You're a professional, right?
And I think we have to reckon with one of the effects of the pandemic is that the world changed. Business, all other businesses and industries changed. And education changed briefly enough for us to see how some of these other fields operate, right? So what does it mean that I can wake up at about 7:30, 8 o'clock, cook breakfast, make coffee. I can log in, log off. I can go to the bathroom when I want to. I can go drop off dry cleaning. I don't have to pay childcare. And so we had a taste of what our friends in other industries had just been experiencing. And so when we changed back, it was like a throwing back into the fire that we forgot was true, right? What does it mean to be on my feet from 8 to 3? What does it mean to have to engage 25 people and I can't just press mute? And so because the rest of the
Sorry.
world had changed, there were all these new opportunities that existed for me to keep the impact I want to have on kids and in my community and find a way to do that in this new world, right? This new space that allows me to work from home, work flexible schedules. I mean, I ask people who we partner with, because everybody else is struggling. Education adjacent organizations, i.e. coaching organizations, program design, supports, tutors. Who are they employing? Former teachers. Everybody supporting the work of schools without teachers, with the teachers that left.
They are former teachers. They are former educators. That's real. That's a fact.
So I laugh, and I think there's space for everybody in the work. And I think we undercut the way the education landscape has changed and the pathways to impact education, right? And so back in our, generations ago, there weren't like program coordinators and research designers and, outside organizations that offer just professional development. And so you had to go to the classroom if you wanted to impact education or impact students. Now there's so many ways to do that. And even the education advocates who are saying we need more teachers, we could solve the problem if all y'all came back, right?
Don't be out here preaching we need more teachers and you're not in the classroom. Oops, that's me. My bad. But
and there's nothing wrong with that, right? But it is what it is. And I think we have to reconcile that true fact. We could close the teaching gap if all y'all came back, right?
Listen, the call to action from Dr. Hayes today, y'all close down your little organizations for coaching and come on back to the classroom.
I sit and I have these crazy random thoughts. I'm just like, there's going to be a bunch of people coaching substitutes because I don't know who they're coaching.
But you're right. You're right. And you're going to have these coaching contracts to coach these subs because I need somebody to help them learn how to teach. But you're like, I could resolve this if you close down your little work and came on back and taught, right?
Like, come on back. That's gonna be my campaign. Come back. Calling back the revolutionaries to the classroom full time, not part time, because we got to run a full schedule.
Yes, listen, y'all heard the call to action right here. And I can't even be mad. I can't even be mad with it. It's a fair call to action because you're right. These little consulting companies, or they're popping up all over the place. And you're right. You're like, if folks just come on back. And it's one of those like, he got a coaching organization right now? Oh, I know I could coach him on the table. Right? Like people like popping up. Or again, you see a lane. I can still impact, but I just can't be in the classroom full time, but I still have an impact. You're exactly right. These little consultant companies, organizations are popping up everywhere. But Dr. Hayes' call to action, y'all, is come on back. But speaking of come on back, let's talk about coming on in. Mm-hmm. Can you share some strategies for best practices for teacher recruitment, specifically Black teachers?
Yes. Man, this is so... One, say you want them. Say that you want Black teachers, right? Say that you want them in this space. And respect that they have choices. And so I think there's a one, we've gotten the message right that we want and need more Black teachers, and there's value in having Black teachers. And we won't get them back as long as we're trying to make like the mission of educating students superior to all the other ways in which they could be impacting children. And the reason I say that is, as long as we rest in the superiority complex of schools as the best way, then we never address all the things that don't make our profession better than those other options, right? And so I want to build up a system that makes my school better than other places, makes the career trajectory better than other places. And so I don't want to believe that Black folks are ignorant to just the things you need in life. Schedule, time, work-life balance, opportunity, impact, goals, support, advancement, all of these things that we can just study and evaluate as it relates to other careers, Black folks are deserving of that same collective information that shows why this profession is important. I also think we have to leverage our social networks and extend our social networks, right? One of the things about Philadelphia, it is very insular. And when I moved into CEO role here, I was on the phone with everybody. You teaching, where you teaching, you looking, you coaching, you leading, that there was nothing more powerful than my phone, my email listserv, anybody I had ever contacted. Share it. Please tell me if you know somebody, if they're looking. What that doesn't help is we're all pulling from the same pool. So everybody, if I know 10 leaders, we're all looking for a science teacher right now. Where we have to do some work around particularly Black educators, we have to be willing to take a risk. We have to be willing to honestly put them in the seat while we work towards making them qualified on this paper and this certification. And so we have to be willing to say, let me get you a taste of it, right? Let me not just wait till you're motivated enough to go through the process and pay the money. Matter of fact, let me show you how I'm going to put together a comprehensive package that pays for your certification, that gets you through the program. You are a person who I feel confident that you care and like about children. You have a reasonable skill set that I can balance and build on, and I can create time and space to develop you. Let me just put you in the seat.
Yep.
We've got to pull people from other places and professions. We're getting caught in this rut where we're just trying to recruit from every other city, and they're recruiting from our city. We have to increase the availability of the pool, right? And so I know that the center is committed to the long-term 12-year pathway. In wartime, there are some emergency positions that need to be filled, right? Send us your best and brightest to come to the front lines while we develop you until we can build up the pipeline. Because what I don't want to happen is we build this amazing pipeline and they arrive too late, right? The damage has already been done by the gaps that existed. If we don't pay attention to both the emergent needs that we have, the emergency needs in terms of this teacher shortage, and fill those gaps, and we only focus on this long-term pipeline, then by the time we actually get these young people who have made it through this long pipeline, what they arrive to won't be worth their arrival, right? It will have been too late, and we won't be able to sustain them once they get here. So I think it is important that we approach this from an emergency room mindset, right? If there's an emergency situation, when I ride through the emergency room and I'm dragged into the table, they need to triage that first before they send me back to long-term care, right? Before they send me back to a specialist. And so we do need to figure out the immediate plan to how we ensure that our classrooms are filled with quality adults, right? At this point, we are more comfortable having a person as a substitute teacher, than we are having a person on the second year of an emergency certification, right?
Yep.
At this point, we are more comfortable having a person that signed up, got the background check yesterday, than we are having a person that scored 2 points too low on the praxis exam, right? That you had a GPA that was 0.1 lower than the minimum requirements. And so we're shooting ourselves in the foot, right? And so all these policies are preventing people who would otherwise may not want to, but who I could otherwise convince to come in and help us until 12 years from now when they get here. We have to offer that. I think the other piece is we have to recreate the structures and systems of teaching. Our profession itself has to change. We are no longer the generation of people that are bound to the noble cause. Black people are impacting other Black people through a variety of measures that are equally valuable. Mm-hmm. And so we have to think about this profession in a way that is a part of the private market, right? We have to become the industry, the place where people want to work. You see how other sectors have made so many different changes to triage that, right? You think about the traveling nurse, right? Because hospitals had shortages, they created a position that paid more, that didn't require a long-term commitment, and then they filled those positions, right, with people who are willing to travel and come around. I'm not saying education should adopt that, but I am saying education has to think about the profession itself. What are we willing to concede? What can we move and change to still meet our goals, to accommodate a workforce with more options and valuable options. I think that teacher coaches are important and valuable. I think that after school program coordinators are important and valuable. All of those positions matter. I am just personally invested in having a school that has highly effective teachers.
Yes, because that's what you're in the business of.
Yes.
And I love this idea of having to kind of take and snatch from other professions. And I think that people also need to be looking at it with a very critical eye of who do they think fits the profile of a teacher, especially when you're talking about Black teachers specifically. I think that, there's a reason why 80 to 85% of the teaching roles are held by white women, right? Because it's a very, I'm going to say, factory style pipeline that has just existed over time. But that factory style pipeline does not fit everybody. So when you're talking about having to go and get Black teachers, and I will hint specifically to Black males because it's a somewhat of an easier collection to do, meaning you see Black males out front a lot of times teaching Black children, maybe not in the teaching profession, but sports is the number one place where you're going to see a Black man leading and teaching a group of Black children, which tells you he has at least a basic ability to manage the classroom, right? He has a basic ability to learn a thing, then to teach a thing, and have young people learn and regurgitate the thing back to him in a way that's engaging. Like he has that basic skill.
And there's a necessary convergence of interest, right? Interest convergence. I need to ensure that our interests converge. And so what we find is particularly Black males and Black people are in so many spaces that are education adjacent. Because the fear is that if I go into education, I'm so bound by the bureaucracy and the policies and the expectations that I won't be able to truly fulfill my mission in my most authentic way and in demonstrating my most authentic self. And so I actually argue that I may not be able to concede that whole thing. Baby, the expectations are going to be there. We're still driving towards results. Learning needs to happen. And if you like an elective where you have a day every day in the week that you can teach your passion and kids will walk out, I have a guaranteed group of students, I'll give you that elective. Got it. But because I know you can also be an equally amazing English teacher, I need you to give me those 3 periods of results in English, and I'm going to give you this space. I'm going to give you a room. I'm going to give you kids who you can learn from. I'll support your materials. And so there's an interest convergence that can happen if we just have those conversations. I tell people all the time, what you need. Like if I find a candidate, the first question I ask them is, what do you need? What are you looking for? By the time I ask the questions, I've already decided I want you, and I'm willing to flex the system and move it. And so that is how businesses operate, right? If you are a high-profile candidate, people will flex and move heaven and earth to get you there. So let's treat them like high-profile candidates. We can't be so bound to the system and the status quo that we are willing to just take whatever and go with the gaps because we just don't want to change. Like that day is gone. That's a wrap.
And what I want to highlight about what you said today, even in terms of recruitment and the existence of the teacher profession now, we're willing to let qualified, competent people walk out of the door. And I'm just saying qualified, like long-lasting. Somebody could have a long-lasting career in education, walk out the door because of a GPA they earned in undergrad versus allowing somebody who's a sub, right? Like, don't even know if you qualify, had training, even thought, like, don't know where you go. You just from an agency that shows up to be in front of children. That is a warped, backwards thinking.
It is so messed up. It is. And you look at it in the face, like I look at it from the compliance measures that I'm bound to, right? And I'm just like, this does not make sense. And it's a quick fix. It's actually a pretty quick fix.
It is.
It is a signing of the pen to change policy very quickly. And we would just rather say, make do just for the compliance of it all.
Yep. I've had several people come to me about GPA requirements and things and such that they like, how do I fix this? Like, I can't. Undergrad is done. Like, it's over. And I'm still being held to a measure of this.
Even a transfer certification is difficult, right?
From state to state.
Who are we that we are so great that you taught 10 years in another state and no, you ain't got the proper paperwork. You didn't do this. Seriously? I got 5 subs and you want me to just say, you want to move here, but your cert's not going to transfer. You
And
gotta be
that's the bureaucracy of states. Meaning, I don't know what raggedy standards you had in your state, but
right.
my state, like,
It's
it's
crazy. It's
it is.
crazy to me. And then you undermine. If I got a cert, then somebody says that I'm qualified to hold the position. Then trust me to make sure the people in the building are qualified to teach. Right? How about you just give me the authority to say they're good, I got it, because you're going to judge the building. You're going to judge what happens, the results that we produce, and you're going to hold me accountable to that. So let me
Yes.
figure out who are the people I want to get those outcomes with.
Yep. Yep. You're right. Now, once you get them, how you hold them, Dr. Hayes? Once you get them, how do you hold them?
So that is, listen, I I don't necessarily think I can keep people forever, but I can keep you 2 years longer than you thought you would stay. And so,
How do you
listen,
do it?
listen. And so I think in every place that I've been, I've tried to figure out what makes people tick. And that is different for people. And I think leadership has to reflect and be what those people need to be able to stay. And you're not gonna keep all of them, but you do need to be trying to keep your best and brightest. And I will bargain. I mean, I have made some deals that, bless it. Listen, I have given out, I will give you a title in a minute. I don't care what you want to be called. Ain't no budgeted title. You want to be director of programs. You want to be director of international services. Because listen, Gen Z love a title. Gen Z want a title. You can be chief ambassador of what you want to be from that classroom getting these results. So guess what?
Yes.
Take it, put it on your resume, whatever you want to do. You want a class schedule, if I can accommodate it and we can keep it on the low, that you ain't working last period because we know you got 2 kids you got to pick up, great, I can do that for you. The goal is to have the most qualified adults in the building teaching in front of kids. And from a business perspective, the business has to do what's necessary to keep highly qualified people. And I tell people up front, I'm very upfront, and this is where we also miss it. We're not upfront with people. I tell you what I can't do. Right, I'm very clear about what I cannot do, and in some spaces, money is the thing I cannot do. But I can make the job a little better for you, right? I can say, you want to run this club, you want to have this activity, you want this flexibility, you want to go to this PD. I tell people all the time, and they rarely take advantage of it. Find a PD. I ain't never heard a leader that said we don't want you to be better at the craft that you're in and do better. Right?
That's right.
Find a PD and make sure your sub plans are tight. Got it.
You can go.
You want to call out to, finish up the paper for your master's thesis? I'm with it. And so I do see people, at some point you have to view them as like everybody's a LeBron or a Rodman in supporting role. Like everybody has a role, or a Jordan. Like, you flex for these people. You get the people they want on the team with them. Yo, if you tell me you're a great teacher and you got a homegirl that ain't happy, let me see what we got open. Fast track.
Come on over, sis.
That's just good business. People want to work with people they like. People want to work with people that are actively moving towards the same common goal. We as school leaders have got to adopt some of these business principles to get people in the building.
I love that. I really love that. And I love the way that you're thinking about it, again, in a very innovative way. Like comparing your GOAT teacher to LeBron, and what supporting, or Jordan, and what supporting cast is needed to make the school, which is the team, a championship school.
Yo,
right?
LeBron is LeBron. LeBron gets to say, I want to play with these people. Because the assumption is LeBron wants to win, as does the coach and the GM. We also know LeBron has a very unique, specific, highly qualified skill set and should be able to recognize talent that complements it.
Yes.
So if I'm good enough to get LeBron to come to my team, then I also got to be good enough to get the things in place that LeBron needs, right? For him to be successful. And if I'm seeing everybody is that, it's the business. It's the business. LeBron, you want number 24. You want to be in room 308. Got it. If that room is Shayna, it is crazy. You would be surprised. I think some of the things that teachers want get lost in these messages, like these higher messages around overworked and, too much being asked and like the trauma of the school. Some people just want a quiet space to work, and they work in a building where they have to keep changing classes. And to change that thing would change everything. Some people have a longer commute and just need to leave by 3:30. So the mandatory PD till 4, and they will make it up. They'll come do breakfast. I've had teachers say to me, I will come work breakfast if I can just leave at 3:15 every day.
It's an
Yeah.
easy fix. It's an easy fix.
And
Easy
I have
fix.
to also not be, I have to stand and be able to say equity is also supporting people who demonstrate excellence, right? When you get the results that Miss Terrell get, you can get what she get from me, right? You can listen. Competence, excellence, outcomes are the currency of this business.
It
You don't
is.
get the corner office.
You ain't producing, bro. But again, and people having to understand business or how that is at certain levels. In eighth grade, I got a lesson in equity. It's called money in the bank. My teacher would say, this person doesn't get this consequence because they got money in the bank. When you already are overdrawn, or yeah, it's on for you
Right.
because you overdrawn. But when they got money in the bank, it's a different way to operate. So if you are getting results, if you are a willing member of this team, if you can produce and you're committed and all that other good stuff, yeah, I can adjust and I can be flexible for you. But I think what I'm hearing you say too, as a leader in these times, flexibility is important. Meeting people where they are is important. And like you said, working and brokering these deals is important to keep people happy. You're not saying I'm giving everybody everything that they want.
Right.
I'm not. But I'm investing in great teachers and making sure that they are happy in ways that I can and telling them in ways that I cannot. And I think that that's more than fair. And as simplistic as that sound, I've been in places that are so rigid, people wouldn't even think to operate in this way. Or wouldn't even think to operate in a way of like, I'm talking to this person to find out what they need. No, they'll do things like, we're going to give cupcakes at this time because that's going, teachers need food. Not saying that they don't, but have the specific conversation and see what teachers need and follow up on that. So dope, dope, dope. I want to get to this topic before I get you up out this chair because I know you got to go back to leading the great schools here. So in a time where there is tons of division in education, right? Like, but we should really be unified, especially in this post-pandemic world and what's happening to our Black children. Let's talk about urban education specifically. Why in these times are we still talking about Black children from a deficit perspective? And what would you say is needed for Black children to thrive?
I would say we've got to be the first ones to change that narrative. Black people.
We, as in Black people,
Black
yes,
people have got to be the
100%.
ones to first stop talking about our children and ourselves from a deficit mindset. And this is going to be controversial to my good mentor. We've got to stop placing so much inherent value in clinging to the struggle, right? We want to prove who has it the toughest, right? We find value in saying, I'm from so and so, I got this, I grew up tough, and we find our value in that identity related to our struggle, and that is internalized racial oppression at its finest, right? That we have
Agreed.
found value in our oppression, we have found value in our lack,
Mm.
and we never really celebrate that sometimes it can just be easy and it can be good and it can be great and we can just be successful without having to look over our shoulder to figure out, right?
And understanding as Black people that there's value in our excellence and other people create a struggle and oppression for us that we don't create for ourselves.
Right.
So this whole notion that we are the struggle. No, somebody imposed a struggle upon us, and yes, we rise,
Right.
right? Like that's who we are as a people, but who we are and that also who we are as a people is excellence. We rise because we are excellent. We're not risen because we are a struggle we got to fight out. No, we're excellent. We're resourceful. We're all of these things. That's why we can continue to beat struggles. But we shouldn't have to continue to beat a struggle. You are absolutely
Yep.
right in the words that you are
And
speaking.
to that same vein, I think that we have to absolve our children of some of these deficits that we say exist that actually don't, right? They actually don't have the gap. It's your ineffective and practice and your inability to draw out, right? And I'll use the clearest example. Classroom is going crazy. Kids all over the place. Teacher runs out. They're out of control. They've gone through so much. They can't do this. They can't do that. If I walk in the room and say, sit down, and they sit down, they could. That means they could. That
That
means
means they
that they
could.
could. were fully capable. There wasn't a gap. The gap was in you, right? And so,
You. Ooh,
and like
child.
that is the clearest example of we ascribe deficits to kids that are really our own deficits and our inability to get them from point A to point B. And so I push people on that all the time. I'm just like, you're going to be hard pressed with me to come into me and say kids can't, kids didn't do it. And then I go through the Rolodex and find at least 3-4 examples of where they did. And so if they ever did it once, they can do it again. And so therefore the gap is not in them, it's in you. And so particularly in my leadership, people hate me first. Like I will always, any space, and it is what it is. When I walk into spaces, I am hated first. And the reason I'm hated is because I'm unapologetic about the bar for kids and outcomes for kids. I don't like or accept excuses where the data suggests otherwise. Definitely. And I'm going to hold you accountable to the business, right? And then people love me, right? They once we can agree on these principles of the business and the work and the potential for kids, then you'll see I'm willing to work with you to get that. But we got to agree on that, right? And I just hate, this actually triggers me. It triggers me.
I see.
People say that kids can't. My goal is to get every kid off of their IEP, right? Every student with an IEP, my goal is to give you all of the resources and tools to modify and accommodate as you need to when you leave here. Ain't no IEPs in the real world. And so if that ain't your goal, then we on the wrong page, right? And so
yes.
Yeah, it blows me. It takes me up a wall when people talk about what kids can't do. And if I can ever walk in a room and I can get a kid to do it, then the deficit was not in them.
It is in you. And I think people need to understand that and have accountability towards that. And you're right. It's this whole internalized impression because black people also need to see the excellence within themselves that they possess. And where that gap lies in others, mediocre white women, so to speak, who don't have the ability. It's not that kids can't, it's actually that you can't. And I think that the narrative is told that way so largely because there's so many of them in these classrooms with our children. So the narrative gets spilled out as they can't because these white women don't want to be held accountable. So it's they can't. And people are listening.
And I've seen that message trickle into kids in ways that are so harmful. I can recall very vividly walking into a room they were out of pocket. They were off the charts. And the kids said to me, they said, she should have known that she couldn't control us. We need somebody. And that word control triggered me in such a way that I was just like, I had to address them first. I said, one, we are human beings and a proud people who never need to be controlled. That is, dear God, that's the last thing I'm trying to get us to get back to is we need to be controlled. And so when kids identify themselves as being a part of a group that just has to be controlled and is out of pocket and somehow just less than, they expect and look for a system and people that will respond in that way. I can only value you and respect you if you control me, right?
And controlling mechanisms, what they expect for the use of that, right?
And so
yelling, beating, all types the expectations of what you need to be controlled. Insane.
Right. And so we're creating a longing for a low bar, right? A longing for low expectations, a longing for overly critical disciplinary consequences. If we just held ourselves to better accountability in our ability to execute the business of the profession.
Fact. Doctor, you better speak on these black babies and what they deserve and what they need.
Yeah.
My last question to you, it's probably going to be a long answer, but I know we got to wrap soon. But with all of your experiences that you've had, you've been in public, you've been in charter, you've dealt with black, you've dealt with white, you've dealt with old, you've dealt with young. Do you think it matters at all where students are, whether they're in a public school or a charter school? Why is this such a huge dispute in urban education? And what is that argument really about?
Yeah, so this is interesting. I don't know who watches this or who's going to be watching it, but a little known secret. I was a former charter hater. I was that district principal who was like down with charters. They taking all of our kids. They're not educating the same kids. I'm tired of them. I'm getting them good. And then I send them and they go to another school. They go to the charter school, or y'all kick out all the kids and all of a sudden I'm getting it. I was that person. And I had to take a step back and come into the charter space and just attempt to appreciate it for what it was, while also not devaluing what my experience was in the traditional public school. I think above all else, I believe every child should have a high quality school in their neighborhood. I am pro neighborhood school in whatever form it comes, pro quality neighborhood school. And so
Yes.
when I see the tension between district versus charter, it is this false assumption that we are somehow not a part of this larger ecosystem of an entire city, right? And so that is also intentional to just, the division of our collective identity of we are working for Philadelphia students and Philadelphia families, right? And so even when I think about like, ooh, this is going to be real controversial. I don't see how you can be a council person and be against any school that is in your district. I don't care. Like, the kids are there, the families are there. And so in the same way that where kids are, I'm going to go be there to serve them. I don't care. I'm agnostic to that. And that my job is to the people I serve. Now, the difficulty is we see something in the other place that we see as a threat to who we are. Right. And I think we get caught up in these narratives that somehow we need to discredit these other spaces that are educating kids. On the district side, I need to say that you're not educating the same kids, you're breaking the rules, you're kicking kids out. And those are true in places, but there are a lot of places that is not true, and we are educating the same kids. Mm-hmm. In the charter space, I create a narrative that says you're not working hard in the district, you don't care about kids in the district. And that is simply not true. And if we could just stop some of this like false narratives around each group, we could actually build a bridge. Agreed. The intent of charter schools was to go incubate innovation that was not necessarily possible in a larger bureaucratic system. The goal of that was to find these incubators of success and then replicate these practices in the district schools. We never built the bridge between the incubation of the partnerships. And now we find ourselves in a space where there is just scarcity of resources. And so where there is scarcity of resources, there is violence. And what we have is growing violence between public and charter sectors, traditional public and charter sectors, because there's scarcity of resources. There's scarcity of teachers, so we're all fighting for the same people. There's scarcity of funding, so we're all fighting for the same money. We're fighting for the same grants. And so as long as you exist, you are a threat to me thriving. As long as your opportunity to be a better school, your flexibility, your ability to offer more money, you're a threat to my human resource capital. As long as you have foundations that can give money to your buildings, you're a threat here. As long as you're a larger district that makes the rules, you're a threat. And so somehow I need to take you down for us to level this. And so what we do need is a more comprehensive approach that sees kids as a part of a larger community and ecosystem. And the opportunity we have when we accept a portfolio of schools that provide families and students an option to choose the school that is the best fit for you. And doesn't suggest that every school has to be the same. It does need to provide a portfolio of schools that parents and students can make a choice.
I love that. I love it. And I think the reason why I love your answer is because, again, you're not choosing any particular side. You're putting children and you're putting families first. So when you're talking about student first, when you're talking about parent choice, and when you're talking about the ability for Black children to have a choice, I use a lot of times the suburbs as an example, right? You're not going to find charters like that out in the suburbs, but you're really only going to find one school. You're going to find one high school, right? But you're going to find 3 to 4 elementary schools, maybe 2 middle schools, and they all feed into one place. The reason why people are never in uproar about school choice in the suburbs is because them parents are going to demand actually, they're not going to let you run no raggedy behind school and think that they're going to stand for that and live for that, which is why they have so much power, right? In their community, in their districts, because if Miss So-and-so's out of pocket or my kids ain't learning or our college rates is this, I got something to say to you. We're going to have a bone to pick about that. But when you come where there's low income or poor Black people, somehow we're not deserving of a voice, number one, to be able to elevate concerns. So then when there's an alternative path or alternative route, which is like our rights, once again, somehow we're not deserving of that either. So it's super, super important that we be on the side of families first and children's first. But Dr. Hayes, we are going to actually wrap right now. But before we go, we always give our guests the opportunity to thank Black teachers or to thank a Black teacher. So do you have any in mind before we go that you would love to thank right now?
Yes, I am from a small town, 7,000. So I went to the elementary school. There were 4 of them. I went to one of them. And I was fortunate to have a row of Black teachers from 4th grade to 6th grade. So shout out to Miss Frazier, my 4th grade teacher, Miss Moses, God rest her soul, my 5th grade teacher, Miss Marine, my 6th grade teacher, Mr. Muldrow, my 6th grade teacher, and another Miss Thomas, who also passed away about 4 years ago. And I also want to thank my principal, Miss Doris Basquette. And so I was fortunate to be surrounded just by teachers who love the profession, who retired from the profession. And so I'm grateful for that.
This is why you such a great black leader, honey. You had all this Black teaching excellence in your family, at school,
and still needed to be told, you need to teach.
Yes, inspire these people. Dr. Hayes, we want to thank you for your time with us today. You have been excellent. We will surely be having you back on Building the Black Educated Pipeline podcast to talk about some other things, because you are a real person doing the real work and the real struggle. Thank you, everybody, for watching us this week. Again, like, subscribe, tell a friend to tell a friend. We'll see you back here next time. Peace, y'all.